evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Mishkan Players' presentation of Sister Hills. Sister Hills is a compelling story from the book of short stories, What We Talk About Anne Frank, by Nathan Englander. This year's One Book, One Jewish Community selection, as well as Mishkan Shalom's One Book selection. This presentation is, I think, the third or fourth in a line of programming that Mishkan has put on for this book, and we're really delighted to have you all here. This started out as a dramatic reading, a very simple dramatic reading. But you know how it is when you get a group of creative, intelligent, and inspired people together. It blossomed, it grew, and well, you'll see in just a few minutes what we've done here. We're very excited. At this time, I'd like people to silence your electronic devices, and please no flash photography. After the performance will run about an hour, and afterwards we'll be having a discussion led by Will Siegel. And after that, we'll have some refreshments that you're welcome to please join us for. We hope that you enjoy the show, and thank you so much for being here tonight.
It's 1973. On a hilltop not many miles east of Jerusalem, Hanan Cohen watched the dust rising up in the distance and knew they were having a war. The roads remain empty on the Day of Atonement, and the cloud from a convoy barreling down toward the desert could mean only one thing.
We will come too. There will be some ways to help.
You stay with your mother.
But we're men now. We have a role in this country too.
Follow your father and see if there's any way you may serve your country in its time of need.
Rena did not sleep that night, worried as she was for her husband and her sons. The worry made worse by the newness of the place and its simplicity. Centered in the middle of an olive grove, the shack was without running water or electricity. A home so rustic wasn't wired for a phone, and a large olive tree blocked her view of anything approaching. When Rena broke her fast after dark, she thought about hiking down across the little valley out her front door and climbing the hill on the other side. For on that other side, on that smaller summit, sat another shack with another family, the only Jews for miles around. In it lived a husband and a wife and their new baby daughter. The husband, Skotte, was a friend of Hanan's, and together they bought the land and decided to settle this area of Samaria together and build from their two families a great and mighty city on that place.
Rena figured that Skotte too had seen the dust, and that most sensibly Hudit had taken their baby daughter and followed her husband to the closest road when he'd left to join the fight. At the best of times, this was not a safe place to be alone.
After washing her hands and saying her prayers, Rena went outside with the axe to size up the task ahead. It was the biggest tree in their grove, a solid 4 meters around. She swung at the tree's knobbly base with all she had. When she was feeling forlorn, too tired to hack at that stubborn bowl anymore, she'd look out past the tree, over the edge of the hill, at the Arab village below, and she'd swing. Watching this handsome mother of three at work, her hair tied back in a kerchief, you would not know that things weighed heavily at all. You would not know it if, upon taking her periodic look over the edge of that rocky slope and spotting a skinny young man climbing its worn ancient terraces, she hadn't buried that axe in the ground and lifted a rifle from the dirt.
Kaf! Tafsiki! Stop chopping my tree.
Who are you?
I'm your neighbor from down the hill.
Then stay down the hill.
I would have, but I looked up and saw you were doing something that cannot be undone.
It's my tree, on my land, in my country. Mine to cut down if I please.
If it was your tree, I'd have seen you by my side at harvest last year, and the year before that, and 10 years before that, and 100.
You weren't here yourself 100 years ago. And anyway, you don't look back far enough. The contract on this land is very old.
A mythical claim, as meaningless as the one you make today. You will see, the Jewish court will return the hill to us. Anyway, it seems like it's a war, not a judge who will decide. Tomorrow, I'd say, or the next, this hill will be in Jordan, or Egypt, or God willing, back home in Palestine.
By tomorrow, this tree will be at the bottom of the hill, and you can take it, along with your family, to any country you please.
If I find one single tree, one single branch from this tree at the bottom of the hill, I will plant you in its place myself. One more swing, I tell you, and a curse upon your head, a curse upon your home.
You are very tough for a boy with a gun aimed at his heart.
A settler who shoots for no reason would have already shot.
Child, cousin, are we really losing the war?
With each swing, Rita thought of the boy's curse and wondered if she felled the tree that day, if he'd really come for her that night. But that tree was a dense tree, and her axe needed sharpening, and as strong as she was, her arms would need strengthening, or at least a night of rest to get the job done.
Remedy, said every prayer. Why did we move to this place? By whose call did it fall on us to rebuild this nation? Two families alone among olives and enemies. I said to Scotty before all of this, what if there's an emergency? And us cut off, no phones, no roads, only hills around? What if something should happen after the baby's born?
Do you want me to hike down with you? We can be at the crossing before the sun comes up.
No. Too far, too dangerous. You can see already, the decision about this child's life will be made tonight.
Let me hold her.
What are you doing?
Making you a place to rest, so I can care for the baby while you sleep. We'll take turns nursing her through the night.
I didn't come for company. I didn't come to stay.
Well, what can I do that you haven't already done?
You can buy the child.
What?
To outsmart what's coming. It's the way my grandmother was saved from the angel of death.
I'll read Psalms with you until the pages turn to dust, but superstition and magic.
You don't see it. Why else on Yom Kippur would God send my husband off to war? To do that and reach into my home and take away the blessing he just sent me. After I left behind my whole family. After I moved to a forgotten hilltop and sacrificed my life to make Israel whole. No. There's been a sin. Some sort of evil that I'm unaware of, but it's my evil. This child alone out here, utterly pure.
And you think selling your baby will break a fever that hot?
If she were not my child anymore, if she meant so little to me that I'd sell her for a pittance, if she belonged in earnest to another mother, maybe those forces that take interest will see it's not worth the bother. If she's no longer my child, maybe whatever's coming won't even know where to look. Stay Blutot. I won't take more for her than I would for a loaf of bread. I declare this daughter to be a child of this house. I make no claim to her anymore. I ask that you consider one humble request.
Yes.
In making this deal binding, I ask that you let me spare you the burden of raising your daughter until she's a woman. I will watch over her as if I am mother, though I am not. I will raise her with love and school her in the ways of Israel and put her life before mine, if you grant me the right. Do you accept these terms?
I don't. I will loan you my daughter until she is grown, but only if you both sleep here tonight. No daughter of mine can leave me so sick and head out into such a dark, cold night.
Of course. A deal's a deal. May God protect our husbands in the battle. And may God protect our country at war. And may he save this little daughter. And may he bless over you and protect you always. And may he bless our new city. There was only now 2 hovels on Sister Hills.
Amen. Thank you.
A silly superstition you may think, but I believe in the power of the word.
When my boys used to get those terrible fevers, I would give them ice baths to cool them down.
If I had ice, I'd have done it myself.
There's always a way to make do.
Rena walked out to the northern edge of her property, where there was a high boulder that caught the wind. She climbed the boulder in the darkness, already familiar with its every crag. She took up a canteen kept there to cool when the temperatures dropped. One she'd tuck in the shade each morning, her refreshment as she worked the land. Rena stood on that rock and screwed off the cap. She hoisted the container in the crook of her elbow, looking for any signs of fighting from Jordan. And she was comforted as the water sent a chill to her bones.
Look,
A miracle!
a miracle.
Chayal! Chayal! should stumble by us. We have a sick baby and a lady who needs to get to the clinic. Do you have a Jeep? She can't travel this way on foot.
About a kilometer in from the road. That's as far as I go before the rise turned too steep.
Take her. Hurry down. Who knows how much time is left?
Yes, but which one of you is Rina Barak?
Then I guess this is no miracle for me. Thank you, brave soldier. Now, find my boys and tell them to bury their father. Their mother waits at home.
There will be a funeral. There's room in the Jeep for 3.
Look around you. Our great settlement is 2 houses and 2 families. For both mothers to leave would be to lose everything we've started building. Our neighbors from down the hill would be back up in an instant. And a more unforgivable sin than never having reclaimed this land would be letting land that is Jewish fall back into Arab hands. Up here, we fight no less a battle than the one that took my husband. Now, tell me, young soldier, how do we fare in this war?
There was no mirror in the shack for Rena to cover. The collar of her shirt was already torn. There was hardly a way to harshen her life as an appropriate sign of mourning. And so she sat on the crate that held their books, and she grieved. She spent the next 2 days perched in the door of their shack, waiting for any traveler who might pass and acknowledge her loss.
On the 3rd day of mourning, Rena was comforted to see her 3 sons crest the hill. They came carrying supplies on their backs, and with a group of boys in tow.
These boys are from our yeshiva, and they've come to form a minyan with us so we could say Kaddish for our father.
They've taken an oath in honor of our father and his memory. They will make this their home too, and they won't so much as step off this hill until there are 10 for every one of them. Until their 7 are 70.
Look, Mother, and how our settlement grows.
Yes, my boy, and only weeks ago did we go from having 3 men to 4.
It was this day that was talked about for years to come, how Sister Hills became a city. And so moved were the people who heard the story, they forgot even to ask whatever had happened to that baby girl, and where Hanan was buried, and if the Arab boy had ever come back about that olive tree. They were simply taken with the legend of this sacrifice and the chalutz-like pioneering commitment of this woman, as well as that of the 7 boys who followed her sons to settle. The aura of this tale was strengthened by the facts on the ground. One would find it hard to believe that in barely 14 years, barely half the life of Rena's youngest, this settlement had grown to such a degree.
By 1987, there were paved roads and 2 schools and a kollel and a synagogue.
And
thanks to a Texas evangelist who had fallen in love with that place before a greater love undid him. Their settlement had been gifted with a sports center, complete with the only ice skating rink in the West Bank as a whole. This gleaming new city was made all the more beautiful by the contrast of those two green hilltops, one with an olive grove and the other bare. All the cement and paved road, all the street lamps and cobblestones, all the public benches and mailboxes and skinny evergreen trees, all of that came to a stop where the roads wound up to the top of those hills and came to an end. It was, and the most pious of them couldn't help but say it, like two green teats topping those mountains.
But for the additions of running water and electricity, Rena's shack stayed the same. The only discernible differences to her plot of land were the two-story pole on the southern end, on which sat the siren for announcing war, and on the northern tip, the stone obelisk that rose from the top of that giant boulder. It was the town's Andarta. On it were engraved the names of the men of the village who had died at war. Hanan was the first casualty. By the time the Intifada was tearing up the West Bank, the list on that stone was too long for a place so young. There was Rena's oldest son, Yirmiyahu, killed in Tripoli in '83, as well as two of those pioneering 7 boys who'd followed him home. And just days before, on the back of a family already saddled with so much tragedy, Rena had lost her second son, Matityahu. He was nearing 30 and finally engaged to be married that spring.
Below, and with a few green soldiers stuck in the wadi beyond and overwhelmed by this kind of close quarters battle, the men of their town had run down into the fight. And somehow in this melee, Rena had lost her Mati, her warrior. It wasn't even real warfare, only tear grass and rocks and rubber bullets. Rena still couldn't believe it. A mighty son lost to boys throwing stones. She was still sitting shiver. And in contrast to when she'd lost her husband and sat 3 days alone in her doorway like Abraham himself, it was the populace of a small city that now passed through her home. The town had stayed close enough to its roots to revere its founder with something like faith.
The visitor who had traveled the farthest to see her was her youngest, Suki, her last living son, though he was already his own kind of casualty to Rena. Suki had driven from Haifa, where he lived as a liberal, a secularist, and a gay man. He shared an apartment with another young man he'd met at yeshiva. To look at her son, as much a founder of their settlement as she was, Rena could not believe how people transform in the span of one life. And yet, here he was at her side.
It's nice of you to do this for Mati.
For my brother and for you.
13 years pass, and those sister hills now cap a metropolis. The settlement had merged with a younger community to the west. Along with the new territory came a small religious college that gave out in handfuls endless degrees in law. There was a mall with a food court and a multiplex within it that showed all the American films. There was a boutique hotel and a historical museum and a clinic that could do anything short of transplanting a heart.
A core group of idealists remained. These were the families of those first 7 boys and the 70 that followed. There were Rav Kook stalwarts and old-school Messianists and religious Zionists of every stripe. But this didn't stop the colony's transformation into the bedroom community it had become. Behind the bougainvillea-covered balconies lived professors who drove to Be'er Sheva to teach at the big university, and startup types who commuted every day to the technical park in Jerusalem, as well as venture capitalists who would fly to Europe for a lunch and make it back late the same night. And there was a subset among these new neighbors that the founding residents, the farmers and fighters, could hardly understand. The healthy grown men, pale and soft, who lived on Japanese and Indian and American clocks, making trades or writing code, supporting large families without ever stepping out into the light. They came for the tax breaks. They came for the space. They came for the vistas and the fresh air. And because the tomatoes, growing backward in hydroponic profusion, still tasted better than anything they'd had in their fancy salads back on Sheinkin Street.
Who wore a skirt to the floor and a shirt that reached her wrists. She'd studied at the girls' school on the hill and done her national service helping the elderly of their town. When the eldest of her younger sisters went off to board in Jerusalem, and when her father was sent by the settler movement to travel across the United States for long stretches to do outreach, his calling, and send home money, a necessity, she'd stayed in the house to help her mother with the littlest of her 8 siblings and run their home, a strange maze of additions and tacked-on rooms that on the holidays when all were together still burst at the seams. These humble choices found the Harrod unmarried at 27, which in their community left her seen as an old maid.
Despite the fact that the hilltops were forever facing, the difference between the 2 families' lives and the 2 families' fates had put far more distance than geography in between. To anyone who still knew she was up there, Rena was simply the old woman in the olive grove. Yehudit had gone over every few months with a cake or a cooked chicken. As loyal as she was to Rena, she could tell that all her troubles had turned the woman hard. When Acheret stepped into the house one afternoon with a laundry basket full of clean clothes still stiff from the lines, she saw someone darting around in the back rooms of the house. She at first assumed they were being robbed until her eyes adjusted and she made out a silhouette that fit every elder woman of the town.
Gvaret, Mrs., can I help you with something? Your mother. Where's your mother? She's right here. Mother, there's someone to see you. Is this the one I bought? Is this the one that's mine?
Yes. Yes, this is the one that's yours.
Suki, my last boy has been killed. Hit the coastal highway. Run off the road by a boy driving 180 kilometers an hour.
Baruch Diana Met, mercy upon you, Mrs. This is such a terrible loss.
Sit. Oh, another tragedy. How many could fall in one home? Go and get me a hot cup of tea.
No need for tea. We're not staying long.
Please. What?
Look here, look to me at this face. This is where your questions now go. Daughter, come along.
Please, you can't want it this way. Today is no different from any other day. Suki, before this accident, was to you already long gone.
A child distant, a child rebellious, a child cut off in the head and the heart. It is not the same as no child at all. You have always been a smart woman, and what takes place here is not remotely equal. But in a moment, you will have the first tiny inkling of what I, 3 times over, feel.
It's a joke. A silly superstition. You said so yourself. Almost 30 years ago. I remember it like yesterday. You said it was just old country, mumbo-jumbo, a worried mother's game.
A deal is a deal. Daughter, come along. I can see the question you are trying to ask, daughter. The answer is simple. You were sold to me as a child, and for all intents and purposes, you are mine. Mother, what?
Yehudi trailed after Rabbi Kigel in the supermarket. She tracked him down, first by calling the shul, then the kollel, and then the school, where his secretary said he'd run out for supplies. That's where Yehudi found him, pushing a cart tumbled full of cartons of ice cream, a treat for the students for some charitable act.
It is the madness of grief. When the shiva is over, I can promise you, believe Neder, that Mrs. Barak won't want to treat such a trivial pledge as a binding contract at all. I know you don't want to say it, but it is not Lashon Hara to point out between us that you're afraid that Rena's heart has hardened over all of these years.
That's what I fear.
Then, let me pose for you a different scenario. Even if she takes you to rabbinical court and you face the Beit Din over this case, even if that, can you imagine such a thing holding up? Well, can you imagine me taking her side?
No.
So, let us remember that without that woman, as much as without you, the great miracle that is our lives in this place would not be. And even if she contributed nothing to its founding, even if, God forbid, she had only taken and done harm, still, can we not pity her in this time of grief?
Yes?
Especially a woman who has known so much more than joy, sadness, especially a woman who has known sadness so much more than joy. Go on, what is it?
Can you tell me, Rebbe, and I understand the word, but with my daughter taken, what does pity mean?
It means, would it hurt a cheret to stay by this woman through to the end of the period of mourning? After their ice cream, I will send the boys up to pray. I will send up some girls to help. Your daughter will not be left alone. And if harboring such a fantasy allows Rena to survive this terrible week, How bad is it to indulge her for a little while?
What if she doesn't stop it?
Then you will convene a rabbinical court over which I myself will preside. And I promise you, even if it's an hour before Shabbat that you come to me, I will find another two Rabbonim and we'll settle the matter right then. But I will not bring one of the two mothers of this community who has just lost her last son to stand in judgment today.
All right. If the Herod is willing, I will let her stay until Rena rises from mourning.
Not like it was for Mati, and not like it was for Yirmiyahu. It better resembled how it had been when she'd lost her husband Hanan. The new people of the city did not know Rena, and the staunch Mizrahi religious had forgotten her son when she herself had cut him off. Many others in town, though they did not say it, felt the boy had been punished for his evil ways, and they worried that in visiting his mother, such a thought might show up in their eyes. So they made themselves busy with other things, and they told themselves they would visit on another day, until all the days were done.
Daughter, some tea. Daughter, a biscuit.
For a ferret, sleeping on a cot in that one-room shack, her only peace was on her nightly walk to the outdoor bathroom. Plum though it was separate from the house. On her way, a ferret would sneak over to the boulder on which the memorial obelisk stood. She could read the names of the towns fallen and understand that her sacrifice was small.
May you have a long and healthy life. My daughter, let's go.
Where do you take my daughter? The end of the week does not end the bond. Lirot, not even valid currency anymore.
Pay in shekels or dollars. You name your price.
A price? On a girl like this? What kind of mother would sell her daughter?
You know why I did it. To save her.
I also know when you did it, and I know what has changed. What did we pay for these hills so many years ago? Now think what it would cost to buy the city that sits atop them. Understand, Yehudit, I'm alone in this world, but for my daughter, for all the riches this world contains, I wouldn't sell her away. She is my peace and my comfort, my life. Ow, Mother! What?
defied the rabbi's order to appear in their court on the grounds that a case so obvious was no case at all. And when Rabbi Kigel, the man with the ice cream, offered to bring the panel of judges to her, Rena said only,
"My door has been open to all comers since before there was anyone to come."
And so the rabbis came, and they took their places under the tree that would offer the most shade. Since none of the rabbis knew to look, they did not notice the scar at the tree's base, grown over in keloid fashion and healed up in the interim 27 years.
Yehudit spoke passionately and with great urgency, and Rena did not listen. She just stared at the two rabbis flanking Kigel's side. If Kigel was 10 years older than Rena, the one to his right was another 10 years older than that, and as for the child rabbi to her left, she didn't believe he'd been yet bar mitzvahed.
A boy, a child who has never known a divided Jerusalem, who was raised in a greater Israel where he can pray at the foot of our holy temple in a united city, where he can cross the Jordan without fear and look down upon his country from atop the Golan Heights. And here he sits in judgment on my land in the heart of Samaria because of the sacrifices made before he was born.
Well, I don't think...
This I'll grant, but in this life I've already achieved, and this court would prefer to receive the respect that it is due.
And what respect is that?
The respect born of the law. You have sacrificed, you have fought, and I too fight in my own way. You see, look around you. We live in a Jewish country with a Jewish government, and yet these false secular courts send Jewish soldiers to go destroy the homes that we have built, and then they prosecute us as vigilantes for protecting what the good Lord has given. Then in those same courts, those same judges sentence our boys and girls for defending what the Lord has given. We live here in a Jewish country, and I, for one, am very happy that a Jew can come before a court like this and be judged in accordance to God's law, the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu intended.
Then you will judge me as God intended?
We will judge according to the divine law as given to humble minds of men.
That is all I wanted to hear. It is not far from here where Esau returned from the hunt, tired and hungry, and gave away his birthright for a bowl of red lentils. It is among these very hills where Abraham, our father, brought a heifer, 3 years old, and a goat, 3 years old, and a ram, 3 years old, and a turtle dove, 3 years old, and a young pigeon, and split them all, save for those birds, and left them for the vultures in a covenant with God, which gives us the right to this land as a whole. And for 400 shekels of silver, Abraham bought the cave in which he lies buried, and over which, with our Arab neighbors, we spill blood until this very day. Now, tell me, these contracts between God and man, written down nowhere, only remembered, do they still hold?
Don't turn this into a day of blasphemy. Don't dare compare our modern trivialities to what occurred in biblical times.
I ask only, does the verbal contract with which God granted us this nation stand, or does it not? With respect, with honor, I ask.
We don't need a piece of paper when the contracts are with God. And the ones you list are those between man and man. And those, too, are recorded in the Torah, of which every word and every letter was whispered into Moses' ear by God? The answer is they are valid and unquestionable, and also do not compare.
I ask you, Geveret Barak, I know you do not intend blasphemy. I know this matter is charged. But please, let us use perspective. Let us keep things in their right size.
My daughter's life. Do not treat it as small.
My daughter, as much as this is my city, as much as this court convenes at my home. If you want to reject our ancient covenants as irrelevant, then let us talk about modern times. From the very first day Yehudit and her husband bought their hill, and my husband and I purchased the one where you sit, the Arabs in that village right there below have claimed it a false contract, a purchase made from a relative who had no right to sell.
That is the Arab way.
Then is our city built on a lie? If they claim their contract false, a contract entered into the same year as the one now in dispute, do we give up our homes? Do we give up our city? They too are willing to pay back the amount they received.
A Jewish court. It's not the same between a Jew and an Arab, and it's not the same between two people at war.
I see. This is a false court. You try to trick a lonely old woman in mourning. Judgment has already been passed, hasn't it? There's no way I can win.
No. You will be awarded motherhood only if you are right.
Promise it. Make them both promise that they will follow what this Beit Din decides. I will not have this settled by emotion. If this is a valid court and an honest court, I will have it settled by what is right.
You will.
We will follow the court's ruling. From her, I want to hear it.
I am the founder of this city, the same as you, only more. I was born of these hills, and to these hills I return. I know no other place. I know no other world. If this is the law of the land, if this is what the rabbis decide, then so be it. I will follow the ruling of this court.
Tomorrow is Rosh Hashanah. From then, we move into the 10 days of repentance, when God decides who will live and who will die. Let each of you pledge to judge honestly or be written out of the book of life. Then I too, I promise, will accept whatever it is you say.
We would prefer to avoid that kind of extremism.
Then you do not have my trust.
We will judge honestly, or let us be written out of the book of life.
Then, I need raise only one simple point, and this case can be resolved. If you three pious men will grant me that you are kosher, you will also grant that the girl is mine.
One does not follow from the other.
But it does. You are going to side against me because my contract with Yehudit, you will say, is symbolic. Because my contract with Yehudit can't be considered to be a contract at all.
I don't want to say one way or the other, but there are many facts that a logical person must consider.
Then I ask once again, are the three of you kosher? Have you knowingly broken the rules of what is fit to eat?
We have not knowingly done so.
Do you three observe the Jewish holidays? Are you faithful in carrying out Jewish law?
It is safe to assume.
Then tell me, if you are willing to state that my deed on this land is sound and ignore the Arab claims against it, If you are willing to accept biblical contracts as eternally valid, though we have no proof beyond faith that they ever were, I ask you, very simply, each year on Passover, when you sell your chametz to a Gentile so as to avoid breaking the edict against having any trace of it under your roof, when everyone in your congregations does the same, are those contracts real?
That is a contract that's as valid as any other.
And in all your years, have you ever heard of a Gentile anywhere in the world stepping into a Jewish home to open a cabinet and take what is rightfully his? Is there known to you such a case? Then tell me, if the selling of the chametz is based on a contract that has never once been exercised in all the years of your lives, in all the world over, can you still say it is a valid contract? Or do you admit that really each one of us, each one of you, is in possession of chametz every Passover, and that no Jew really observes the holiday as commanded?
God forbid!
You find yourself on the edge of blasphemy again. But if there's a point to be made, then yes, that contract is valid, exercised or not.
If that is a valid contract, if you three can still call yourselves kosher, then you must admit equally valid is mine. Just because it's assumed that one party will never exercise her rights doesn't mean the rights are not hers. And tell me this, when a little bar mitzvah boy says to a pretty girl, as a joke, "You are my wife," and he gives her a bracelet as a token?
A divorce is arranged. We have done that many times. But yes, if he says it and a gift is exchanged, they are married just like any other two adults.
Even if neither really meant it? Even if it's just an innocent joke between two young people at play?
Even then.
That is all I'm saying. That a contract doesn't require either party to intend to exercise its terms, or even for both parties to be mature enough to understand them. And likewise, a symbolic contract like that of Passover, whose intent on signing is that it never be put into use, is as valid as any other in the eyes of God. So, all you're really deciding in this case is whether the money on the table before you was of any value at the time the deal was made. That is all this court is being asked. If you are religious men, following religious law, there's nothing to say but that the girl belongs to me.
The same as a slave. That's how it would be.
Call it what you will, but the girl is mine.
Dark on the western edge of the hill. Rosh Hashanah dinner had finished, and she'd come out to the edge of the grove to stare across to the hill opposite. It was the second night since the verdict, and so different from those first days when she tended to this woman during her week of mourning. Aheret was hopeless, and since suicide was forbidden, a grave sin, she could only wish and pray that the word for her would come for an end.
Let me be written out of the book of life. Please.
Please let this be decided this week. My life is in your hands.
What Aheret saw when she rounded the house and passed the big tree was a battle being raged inside Israel like none she had ever seen. The village below was practically afire, not with the force of Israeli aggression, but with the unleashing of a new kind of Palestinian rage. The bypass roads that had sprung up throughout her lifetimes were blocked, tires burning at every edge. More Arabs than she had ever knew existed streamed out to fight the Israeli soldiers who'd already arrived. In the sky coming from Jerusalem, she could see the lights of the Blackhawks and Cobras. And then she saw nothing as the helicopters went dark so as to enter the fight in stealth. Of all the ends to this country she'd imagined, this was not one foreseen. She did not think since the time of its founding that it had ever known such violence to rise up within its borders.
Do you think the whole country is like this? It's another intifada. Look at that Palestinian Authority truck. Which naive Jew thought it was safe to give them guns? And on a holy day, again they attack. Tonight, this tree comes down. We can never let ourselves be sneaked up on again.
Oh, no, it's Yom Tov tonight, Mother, forbidden.
In an emergency, such measures are allowed.
No, I won't do it. The soldiers fight, Mother. The Arabs have not yet come up the hill, and even if they did, seeing them overtake us from the window won't help us survive.
Insolent daughter. I'll do it myself.
No, you're not.
Call the ambulance.
Yes, I will, Mother. Right away, I will. But the question is when. I mean, you're right, Mother. It is permissible to pick up a phone on a holy day. If it's a matter of life or death, well then yes, but the fact that you are still with us may mean the danger has already passed.
I think a heart attack.
I think you're right, but I think that if it was large enough to be fatal, well then you'd already be dead. What is at stake now, Mother, I'd imagine, is the extent of the recovery you might expect. And that is where speed is of the essence.
What do you say, daughter?
This is not a matter of life or death. What this is a matter of life and quality of life. If we get you help in a hurry, I imagine you'll be your old self once again. You will be good as new. If I leave you here by this tree, if I wait until the end of the holiday, until it's permissible to pick up a phone, well, I can't say things are going to turn out very well at all, Mother. You think you're weak now? You think you're in pain? Just lifting a glass of water to your lips will feel like you're carrying a mountain on your back. Seeing old people, Mother, with soggy hearts and damaged lungs, it's not a life to be lived.
A commandment to honor your parents?
Not when your parents... No, not when your parents command you to break a holy law.
Permissible, no matter what. Life and death.
No, not with all these minutes tick by. No, I don't see it as such, Mother. After the holiday, we'll convene the 3 wise rabbis, and we'll see if they think, by law, what I did was right.
Cursed girl.
Cursed daughter! Isn't that what you mean? Not long in this house, and I have already learned what I need to do to get my way. Never in my other home would such a thought have even crossed my mind. Now listen. Listen close, Mother. It's very, very simple. You free me, and I'll call right now. I'll take you to the hospital, and I will stay with you until you are back up on your feet. I will do this for you, not as your daughter. As a daughter of Israel and of this settlement, I will treat you as I would have before you ever even cashed in this bond. Just let me go, and I'll call, and there's a great chance that you'll be able to walk again and dress yourself and live a normal life. Isn't that what you want?
Don't need it. Don't need to take care. Don't need to walk.
Mother, how can you say that?
Because I have you to take care.
It's 2011. Dimitri and Lisa stand on the edge of the hill with a real estate agent, and they stare at an endless stretch of security wall.
In most of these parts, it's just fenced, but here, because the village is so close and because the fighting at the start was so severe, it's good rebar wall all the way. When it comes to security, you can't ask for anything better than that. So you don't even have to think about it. Really, put it out of your mind. And furthermore, it's been quiet along here for about the last 10 years. Still, no one in these parts should be unwary. God forbid something should happen, look again. No direct line of fire, no worries about snipers, no hiding under the bed. Intifada 3 breaks out, and I promise you it won't make a peep in your life.
And internet out here in the boondocks, is the building wired for high speed?
Every single unit. And furthermore, see the war memorial? Behind that's a signal booster. So even if you don't buy your own router, the whole town, free Wi-Fi, and the best cell phone service between here and Dubai. Want to see upstairs?
Let's see the upstairs. Oh, excuse my accent. You'll never believe that the two of us met in the same Ulpan class. His Hebrew is so much better than mine.
Ah, the Russians learn quick.
And are they okay? I mean, do they treat the Palestinians okay on the other side? We're kind of left-wing, you know. I mean, for the extra space, for the bedrooms, we live here, but we feel kind of bad for the Arabs with their roadblocks and things like that.
She doesn't want to live among the radicals. She's from Cherry Hill in America. Over there, they want equal for everyone.
Radicals? No. This place, ever since the 70s, this town has gotten along with its neighbors. Always good relations and attending one another's weddings. It was all really quiet along here until the first Intifada broke out. Until then, where one place ended, where the other began, who knew?
Because we don't want the politics. I mean, it's beautiful, the view is stunning, but we're not settlers, and we don't want to be surrounded by that sort.
You mean those crazy Levenger-type settlers? No, not at all. Now, are there stubborn people here? Sure, there's stubborn people here. This is Israel. You see that shack? The old woman who lives there really needed the money that she could get from selling out, but she would not, on any account, let the real estate developer buy her out. There's that kind of steadfastness, and where do you get that from but the salt of the earth? You see, sweet as sugar. That's who your old-time neighbors would be. Those are the people who founded this place. Poor, sick old woman and a daughter who's given over her life to take care of her. Every time I come here, I see them wheeling around, quietly minding their own business. I promise, you two will be very happy here. This is the kind of hill on which to make a life.
No response to one of the neighbors.
I'm Lil Siegel. Can you hear me? Unfortunately, I don't have the mic. Can people at the back hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I really want to invite you all to respond to the performance that you just saw. How many of you have actually read the story before you saw the performance? A few, but it looks like most of you actually haven't read the story, and that's fine. So whether you read the story already or this was the first time that you became acquainted with the story, I'm sure you've all been moved as emotionally as I have, and find it a really very disturbing story. And as the tension in it mounts to this very ironic conclusion, it's chilling. So I'm sure you have some very strong emotions to express, and even some very interesting ideas about what's the takeaway, from this story. I heard Englander speak actually when he was here I think it was in Wynwood at one of the temples, and he was asked questions about his stories, and when he was asked to comment on Sister Hills, he said that it's a story about the intractable war between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and it's about Jewish superstition. Well, obviously, it's about Jewish superstition, but a lot more, isn't it? On the cover of my particular edition of the book, on the jacket, the blurb, it says that this story is a fable. Is it a fable? Is there a moral? So I just throw out these questions for you to consider. And so now I want to open up the floor to comments. Please.
I had the honor of being on the One Book, One Jewish community group that chose this book along with Beth Cohen here. And we are...
Can I stop? Can everyone hear?
No.
Please, everybody, try to speak up.
I said that my name is Mitch Davis, had the honor of being on a committee with Beth Cohen. When we selected this book, we were a little concerned about short stories and how people would react, and we are extremely pleased to see how you performed this story. It was certainly one of the most I mean, many of the people just said this story really was it, but the other stories in the book, since not many of you have read it, I really do recommend that you pick it up. They're wonderful stories, some of them not quite as heavy as this one, but charming, interesting, poignant. You'll enjoy them. I think I also was at the mainline synagogue where Englander appeared. He's so brilliant that he has a hard time keeping his mouth up with his mind. But anyway, he's a brilliant writer, and this was brilliant too. You're quite proud of what you've done.
I'm just curious, if it is a fable and has a moral, I'd like to know what people think the moral is, because I think it's, in a way, kind of ambiguous or could cut several ways, so I'm curious to hear what people think.
What do you think, Simone?
Oh, you always ask me that. I actually am not sure. I mean, part of me feels
Well, why
like...
don't you stand up?
All right. I have a loud voice. Part of me feels like the moral is that compassion means more than contracts. But on the other hand, I kind of get the sense that contracts also somehow matter here. That there is something really powerful in a contract. So I don't know, is the power of a contract real? Is it just some illusion that we need to break? What are the roles of these contracts in our lives, I guess? And I can't answer that one.
Sharon.
I'm so glad you said, I'll just speak loud. I'm so glad you said that because last week we read as a group the Camp Sundown, and I got from the second reading more than I had gotten on my first reading on my own. And the same thing happened today. Seeing the story brought to life, when I read the story, I didn't really focus on the question of contracts. And I'm sitting here thinking, is Englander trying to tell us something? Does he have a message for us in this story about what contracts mean? And in the context of contracts that Israel has made, that they've honored, that they haven't honored, and I don't know the answer, but that was the very question that I was asking myself. Is there a message here from, I'm kind of a believer that the writer has a message for the reader beyond the story, which is not necessarily true, but I tend to read that way, so that's part of what I'm wondering.
Jill?
If there's a message, maybe it's something like words once spoken can't be undone, like you're about to do something that can't be undone. So when you're speaking in terms of contracts and promises, that they should be very thoughtful and weighed very heavily.
I think Ayeret, is that? Ayeret, I think she gives the answer when
Rena.
Yeah. I have to say, I spoke about, just a little sidetrack, I spoke about this with my sister because I borrowed the book from her and read all the stories, and we were talking about how great they were. And she said, but there's one story I can't read again, and that's Sister Hills. It's totally unbearable, and I agree. But when she's having the stroke, and Ayara says to her, I'll care for you. I'll make sure you're well again. I'll do whatever anybody in this, would have done for someone else in the community. That is an answer that responds to life more than the contract. And it's also what comes throughout the story, that you can break the law if it's a question of a life. And so it's a question of Ayeret's life to break that contract. And and the rabbis, we're also wonderful, but when the rabbis were together, you just see them trying to find a solution that has to do with life more than the stranglehold of the contract. And I think that's the answer.
It seems to me the story misses the point with respect to a 30-year-old woman who says, this is my life. I have the right to make certain choices and decisions as to where I'm going to live and who I'm going to live with. And at 30 years old, I can do that. And that's not discussed.
I found myself rooting for both sides. And what this says to me is that if you look at it, it's hard to balance it out because you're not sure who you want to win in this case. Should the daughter stay with her mother that raised her, or should she go to the other mother who needs her? And I don't think there's a clear-cut right and wrong. It's a question of how do you deal with these issues? And that's true in so much of life.
Harold?
How one reacts to this story depends on what one brings to it. And what I bring to it is that I became a Zionist in a camp when I was 13 years old because I met someone, it was 1946, it was the Yeshuvah, and I met this wonderful man who I later found out recently that he had been a lieutenant and colonel in the 73 war. And as someone, and I've been very critical of the occupation, okay? On the other hand, I feel something of what these settlers, religious settlers, feel. First time I went to Israel, I think I was in my 30s. And you go up the road to Jerusalem, and I close my eyes and still see it. And just before you go into Jerusalem, you see what called the West Bank and what in biblical times was Judea and Samaria. And for me, I said, my reaction was, yes, that's what it looks like. I always knew it looked like that when I was studying Bible. And there is something mystical there about it for me. And these people, assuming that they're not violent, that's something else. A lot of the labor people admired them because they seemed to be like the old pioneers. There was sacrifice, and people did lose whole families. So even though it's a fable and maybe a satire, and these rabbis are out of their minds because they're so literal-minded, there's something about the story that really grabs me. And then these newcomers come and say, we're not settlers. In other words, we're just coming here because it's cheaper and the scenery is beautiful. We're not settlers. Right. And, so what do they think they were?
Yeah. Steve?
Hi. I mean, what's interesting to me, and in fact it flows from Harold's comment in a way, is that the one speech act that we haven't talked about yet, right? I mean, in the literary theory of the past 40-odd years has grown very interested in this idea of language that acts in the world, a promise or a contract. And the one we haven't talked about yet is the curse. The curse from the Palestinian. Because that's the one bit of language that he has. Without any recourse to contract, if he's outside of the system, that will not afford him any legal standing, although he hopes for it in a moment, what he has is the curse. And the most consequential language we have in this text, the thing that, especially if you think of this as a fable, that really sets things into motion, of course, is that curse from the Palestinian. And the other thing we might want to ask ourselves is, if this is a fable, what are the rules that govern the contract here between the author and the reader? That is, what is it that, if we're demanding a certain kind of sense from the story, on what sort of literary conventions and what sort of political beliefs, as Harold's already invoked, do we have to fall back on to demand it to make that kind of sense? Seems to me two things to think about.
If this is a corollary for the situation in Israel today, we have
we have two peoples who have contracts. I mean, the Jewish settlers say the contract was given to us, you know, in biblical times from God. The Palestinians say, yes, we have a contract for this land. We've lived here for hundreds of years. I can show you a piece of paper from my grandparents or whatever. So they both have contracts. But the literal application of those contracts does not lead to justice, because literally applying that contract as the Bet Din did led to a preposterous result, as far as I could see. It was not satisfactory to anybody. And I think that's what it's saying, that if the two parties can't stay bound to contracts, that there has to be compassion and understanding of the current situation in order to come to some resolution which is meaningful for everybody. And that's what I think it's saying. You can't adhere to these contracts.
Lil, Eileen?
I just want to add a short,
including your daughter.
Contributing to what Steve said. You don't just have the Arab boys saying we've been here a long time and she's saying we've been here longer or whatever, but you have reference in the trial to Rena saying, even though the Arab said it wasn't a valid contract because a relative sold it and it wasn't his to sell. So she brings up the fact that the contract actually for the sale of that land was not a legal contract, and that's, you know, just thrown away.
So, Harold, you talked about this just a little bit, but I think an important psychological aspect of this story is grief, how people respond to grief and how they act out of grief. The way I understand my character, Rena, is that she has no intention of insisting on this contract that she and Yehudi have made in the middle of the night over a feverish baby. She has no intention of acting on that until she is absolutely undone by grief. Until she feels herself to be so alone in the world without anyone. And remember, this is a woman who has always seen things very black and white in terms of, you know, winning and losing, war and not war. Her question to the soldier after she finds out her husband has been killed is, how do we fare in this war? Up here, we're engaged in a war no less than the one down on the ground. And when she feels herself to be utterly alone, that grief, I think, supersedes her sense of Yehudit's humanity and Aharet's humanity. And if there's a larger message there, I think it's about the danger of allowing grief to drive policy, because what you get is not just.
So just a quick, yeah, I agree. Getting away from a little bit to the contract aspect of it too, I was thinking a lot about Aheret. I mean, she's the centerpiece, and to me, she represents the land, and she represents what is sacred to both of these women. And what does it mean to treat the land as sacred? I'm just raising that as a question, because if that land is sacred, but in the play we're abusing that land.
And the olive tree.
Yeah. And the olive tree, indeed.
You own it, but it has no life.
It also seemed to me that what I'm disturbed by is I'm always disturbed by rabbinical thinking, like the circular thinking, and that I think that what happened to Rena is what's happened to the state of Israel. That whatever hope that state was founded on, if you see, images of settlers, the state of Israel has become hardened and embittered and perverse in this claim on this land, that what it has cost them is humanity. That they're no longer able to have any honor or respect for anything that matters, any ties that matter, like the Palestinian people, because of this belief in this the contract, the biblical contract with Jews and the land, and then the creation of the state, and that it feels to me like that is what happens to settlers when they move there. Whatever joy of Israel they bring when they get there, they then, in that process, have to harden to the realities of having to oppress another people's / a hair in order to have what they want.
I'm going I'm going to step out of my role as specific because I can't resist, comment on what you said. I'll try to keep it brief. But, when Rena says, I will have my bond, that clicks Shiloh in the Merchant of Venice. I want my pound of flesh. And he has suffered from anti-Semitism, and he has lost his humanity. But on the other hand, when it comes to legalism in Jewish law, and my husband was an expert in that, so I learned this from him, that there is always a way of finding leniency in the law. And if you're a follower of Hillel, you lean that towards leniency. If you're a follower of Shammai, then you're stricter and you're more rigorous about the law. And so there is that tension here. And then, of course, in the Merchant of Venice, you have Portia with that speech in the quality of mercy. Of course, the Christians all aren't all that merciful either. But nevertheless, so there is that issue that some of you have phrased about the strict legalist approach and where's mercy, where's humanitarianism. So forgive me for doing that.
I also attended when Nathan Linder was here, and he said that he was very interested in the gray areas. And I think that's what we're seeing here, is that he's discussing that. But talking about the grief, that is so important in every one of the stories, that all of the characters have suffered from something that is just so overwhelming. And the very last story, if any of you haven't read it, I'll kind of maybe entice you to read the very last story, because he comes up with a bit of an answer there about the grief. And the other thing is that this thing with the contracts, I believe the story has 4 different parts. Each part has a different time that he gives you at the very beginning. Each of those times represents a war that Israel had. And in the last one, I believe that was the Camp David Accord, which has never been signed. So those are all the ways. I think this discussion here is very interesting to me because it's all coming together. You guys are so smart. Everything is coming together here for me as I'm listening to this, because we have all of these ideas. What an author. And what a group to have conveyed this to us in a different way than reading it. Actually, you came up with much more emotion because we got to see your faces and your grief. I thank you so much.
On that same vein, wanted to know how you dramatized it, how you came together to decide on how to portray it as emotion.
It's a long story.
Anyone wrote a short story, we have a long story.
The reason all of us in the cast are chuckling is because the initial call that went out in Mishkan's newsletter, Kol Shalom, was inviting people who were interested in participating in a dramatic reading. And if you've been to a dramatic reading, it's quite different from what you just saw. Usually in a dramatic reading, the actors are all dressed very simply, maybe all in black. They're sitting on stools, they have scripts in their hands. Maybe a spotlight shines on each of them as they speak, or maybe they stand up and get off the stool, but there aren't props and costumes and lights and shadow theater and live music and all the other elements we saw today. What happened was when we gathered for our first read-through, we were all so taken with the story and excited about what we could do with it that we literally couldn't stay in our chairs and said, no, we don't want to just have this narration read, we want to act it out. And the next thing you know, here it is. And so then we needed a tech crew, and we needed people who could dream up the shadow theater, and we needed lights and a videographer and live music and all the rest. So we were first here in the building on Wednesday evenings and Sundays for how long? Several months. Several months. Maybe not even that long. Maybe about 6 weeks. Yeah, when did we start? March? Late February, yeah.
Who did the adaptation?
Let's have someone else. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Who did the adaptation to adapt the story into the script?
That was Adam and Andy.
Adam did the first one.
it this way. I turned it into a script. Andy turned it into a play.
What happened was that it was so narrative, and it still was so narrative. And so the effort was to make it more active and less narrative. And it could have been even more, but we stopped there.
So, we could go on, and I wish we could, and I'd like to invite you all to come again for more discussion when, I don't have the date. Sharon, can you give us the date right now? When we're going to have a discussion of the book?
On Sunday afternoon, June 23rd, from 1 to 3 p.m. at the home of Eileen Levinson, who is consulting with Lil. We will have our one book, Mishkan's book discussion of the entire collection. And there's plenty of time between now and the end of June if you haven't had the opportunity to read the whole set of 8 stories. Then we'll gather together and look at all of the stories.
And we're also currently in the middle of a 4-event process, which is to look at the American, Israeli, and Palestinian perspectives on the land and talking about that at Mishkan, because we've been struggling for years with what it might look like to try and celebrate Israel Independence Day when that also signifies a real tragedy for the Palestinian people. So, the 4th event will be a discussion about how we might do that. And that is in your program. We encourage you to do that. And please, if I could ask the board members to stand up just so that if you want to talk to a board member at Mishkan, I know Duran is here, Lisa Gale is here, I'm also a board member, and we'd be happy to talk to you about Mishkan. I think Barry already left.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There's one more event that
Yeah, well, I was going to get to the meeting, actually. So just give me a chance to do that. And also, first there are so many people to thank, and I just want to call your attention to the program so that you will see all the names there, and I won't take the time to read the names. Also, in terms of continuing the discussion, there will be refreshments, and we encourage you to partake and to continue talking about the play. Andy has not only done this wonderful performance, but has also handed me the thank you script. So I haven't had a chance to rehearse it, but I'll read it. Okay. The cast and crew of Sister Hills wishes to thank the Mishkan Library Committee. By the way, I'm chair of the Library Committee. and we have other members of the Library Committee who have also been in the play. So thank the Library Committee for selecting what we talk about when we talk about Anne Frank, this year's one book, Mishkan, and for creating so many different community events around this provocative book. And we had a wonderful class with Harold Gorvine, which was titled What We Talk About When We Talk About Jewish History. And now we have the play, and then we're going to have the book discussion. We thank you for coming to this performance. A few upcoming events related to Israel and Palestine are listed on the back of your program. In addition, check out the TAN brochures, which list some great classes and workshops offered by our Adult Education Committee, including one on genealogy, how to research your Jewish roots. Thank you to all those who lent props, provided costumes, brought refreshments, and were so generous with ideas, time, and expertise as we prepared for this play. A special thank you to Maria Paranzino in the Mishkan office, who carefully handled our many requests for rehearsal time and space at a busy building. And finally, our gratitude and appreciation to all those who have lived and who are still living the bigger story recounted in Sister Hills. It is our fervent hope that both Israelis and Palestinians will find a way to remember each other's humanity and create an enduring peace. Thank you for that. events, I just want to call your attention to one or two that might not be at the back of your program particularly, and also related to your book because of the theme of the Holocaust that's so prevalent in the book. There's going to be a program with Dr. Janice Hamer, who was formerly the choir director for Mishkan Shalom's choir. And she's going to talk about her new opera, which she has actually completed. She actually has a venue for it in Washington, D.C. In November. And so she's going to talk about how she came to write this opera, and that's an amazing story in and of itself. And Makelat Michael, the director of that is Rabbi Elizabeth Bolton, and she's going to lead our choir. And that's going to take place with the Kabbalat Shabbat and Rabbi Linda on Friday, May the 10th at 6:30 p.m. If you lose track of all these wonderful events, go to the Mishkan website and you'll find everything there.
Or find us on Facebook.
And so, just to remind you to partake of the refreshments and one more round.
No, wait,
I'm sorry.
say something.
Yeah, very simply. I was the coordinator of the One Book, One Jewish Community program this year, and as such, I got to spend a lot of time with the author and to visit many programs that were presented as part of our initiative.
Wait, what is your name?
Beverly Cohen. And I just want to say this is one of the most creative, innovative programs I've seen, and I compliment you all. And for people who hadn't read the story, you raised all the right questions. And I'll tell you that in Englander's stories, you won't find answers. What you'll find is questions. And you raised almost every one of them that, and I've read this story 100 times. So I just want to compliment this congregation. This was really wonderful. Thank you.